Hi there, greetings and welcome to this webcast. My name is Jonathan Foust. I am delighted that you are here. Wonderful to have this time to practice and to share a little bit about these practices and how to apply them. The theme for this evening, or for this talk, is on working with delusion and confusion. It's a wonderful way to kind of point toward this whole inquiry in the last couple talks on what the heck does it mean to be awake and enlightened anyway? And one way to look at it is in terms of the absence of things. So, glad you're here. Before we begin, I always like to have some acknowledgments. First, to acknowledge Rita Moran, our mindful movement leader, and our mindful dialogue leader, Ray Manioki. If you want the full Monday night experience, 6:30 Eastern Standard, you can join Rita for mindful movement. That'll massage your innards and bring you in preparation for the meditation that starts at 7:30 Eastern Standard. And then afterward, you can join Ray. And this is a conversation around your practice, and having access to Ray and this group of like-minded folks is just fantastic. So thank you both. Those links are on my Facebook page and on my website. A big thank you to Glenn Harrison, our producer, for making this happen technically, and to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this. I've got a mailing list you can sign up. All my talks are available online through YouTube, Facebook, all the podcast outlets. As always, thank you for your support. Thank you for your donations. They make all the difference. This is all offered freely, so no one is denied access. And I like doing that. I like doing it that way, even though it is just an incredibly unstable way to make a living. Okay, that's it for shameless promotion. Nothing big to promote coming up other than just, the standard. Without further ado, let's get down to a little reality-based meditation. And, of course, the place where we sort of place our attention or take refuge, if you will, is in the body, which is a very realistic thing right now. It's what we've got to work with. The senses are all about the here and now. So we'll do a sense-based practice and kind of open and widen our attention a little bit as we go through it. So when you're ready, just take a moment. You might close your eyes and just sense, how does your body need to move or shift or adjust? This meditation is going to be about 13 minutes or so. So what would help you? Do you want to stretch? Do you want to move? Do you want to let out a primal scream? What's going to help you here? Sometimes it's nice just to let your body rock a little bit from left to right. Can you sense as you rock a little bit from left to right, where's that midpoint, that plumb line? You might even go a little bit back and forth. And again, just where is that place where you feel aligned? You might imagine that you are relaxing through the back of your neck and you're lengthening through the back of the neck. And just notice that doesn't bring just a little bit of awareness to this inner alignment. You may also notice, if you relax through the back of the neck and lengthen through the back of the neck, that your chin will come parallel to the floor. And take a few moments just to notice, where do you feel the breath right now on the inside? And it's a very simple question. Where do you feel the breath inside? In essence, turns your attention from the outer world to the inner world. Throughout this meditation, we are referring back to the felt sense, this direct experience of the body, as a way of arriving. One way to support this is by heightening sensation, or the awareness of sensation on the inside. So you might imagine now, or feel from the inside, your forehead. Can you imagine your forehead smooth? Just track any felt shift. Can you feel the little muscles around your eyes? And can you imagine or feel those little muscles around the eyes relaxing? Can you imagine from the inside out the muscles of your face beginning to soften and track any subtle shift as you feel your face becoming expressionless? Can you feel the jaw relaxing? Opening up that little gap between your upper teeth and your lower teeth, and sense, if you can, the weight of the jaw, allowing the jaw to hang from the skull, if you will. Can you feel the inside of your mouth? Could you relax your tongue and the root of your tongue? Let your tongue fill your lower jaw, and sense if you can soften, relax down into your throat. If you bring your attention to the occipital ridge, right to the base of the skull, and if you bring your attention here and relax and soften, what do you feel? What do you notice? And feeling now the shoulders and the arms. Can you imagine or feel the weight of your arms, the volume of your arms, down through your elbows and down through your wrists? And can you feel the inside of the palms, the volume of the palms? The space inside the fingers and thumbs. If you bring your attention to your lower abdomen, kind of below your navel and in toward the very center of the torso, you might take 3 slow breaths, and on each out breath, soften and feel. What do you feel as you soften and relax the belly? As you sense the hip joints, the space between the hip joints and the floor of the pelvis, just holding your attention here, what could relax? What could soften? Can you imagine from the inside out, the center of the bones of the legs, from the hip joints down through the knees? The backs of the knees and the kneecaps. Down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. And sensing now from the inside the soles of the feet and the heels. And as you sense the whole body, from the crown of the head down through the soles of the feet and the heels. Is there anything right now that could relax or soften? Can you sense who you are as the observer of sensations and everything that changes? The sense of the witness, the observer. And you might, for these next few minutes, very lightly let your attention rest on the breath or this felt sense of the body as a way of resting in the here and now, knowing the mind naturally generates thoughts. When you notice the mind wandering, lost in a narrative, is it possible to come back to this experience of right now and right here? Is there anything right now that could soften or relax? You might explore how in this practice there is a quality of doing, a quality of effort. When you notice the mind, you willfully bring it back. There's also a quality of mindfulness, of open monitoring, of just noticing what's changing and how you're relating to it. And the third quality is a quality of just simply being. You might explore in these remaining minute or minute and a half the sense of letting go and letting be. Letting the breath be utterly free-flowing and easy. Allowing the sounds to come and go. Allowing thoughts, allowing moods and different states, imagining them as cloud formations. Allowing everything to be exactly as it is, without wanting it any different at all. And now very gently you can begin to deepen your breath. Notice the sounds around you. Just sense the quality of presence right now. And now letting yourself move and shift and adjust. Taking your time for your transition. Welcome back. As you may know, I've been offering my talks freely. The whole idea is that no one at all is ever denied access if they're truly interested. But the truth is, my time and the expense of putting these talks is getting higher and higher. And with so many people now offering ads on their podcasts, I'm considering doing the same thing. So I've kind of come up with my first ad. If you're a meditator, you are probably aware of the offering of merit. At the end of your meditation, you offer any benefit you've accrued, any fruit of your practice, first to yourself, that your path may open with greater ease. Then you offer this out to your inner circle, that those you love might benefit from the fruit of your practice. And then out to all beings in all directions without discrimination. It's a wonderful practice, but here's the problem. You don't really meditate. Or you don't meditate long enough or well enough. And if you can't offer any merit to yourself, to your loved ones, or the world around you, what horrible things might happen? Fortunately, we have the solution. We meditate for you. That's right. Myself and my crack team of seasoned, hardcore, flea-bitten meditators will do your meditation for you, and guess what? We direct the merit wherever you want. So if you want the best, if you want to ensure the trajectory of this amalgamation of body, mind, and spirit you call you continues to evolve toward that final awakening, that final extinguishing of the flame of separation, and if you want to share that goodness along the way with those around you, call now. Our shaved head, robe-wearing operators are standing by doing walking meditation until the phone rings, because you know that a life that is not blessed, well, it's a mess. So call 1-800-META-4U today. And happy April Fools. One of my favorite stories, a good friend of mine was horribly worried about his 14-year-old daughter who was not doing well in school at all. And he told her, he said, I'm getting concerned that you're falling way behind. And she gave him this look of pity. And she said, Dad, stop worrying. I'm going to marry a movie star. Maybe she is going to marry a movie star and he's shutting her down. I don't know. But that was about 10 years ago. It hasn't happened yet. What I'd like to talk about is how there are these states, these mental states and experiences of the mind that cloud your perception. And when any of these is present, they are like a dark cloud that obscures the sun. I'd like to talk about delusion or confusion or ignorance, which is essentially a failure to see things how they really are. So with the time I have with you, I'd like to talk about first just the nature of delusion, and then how do you actually overcome these states of delusion or confusion? And then what I find really interesting is, well, what's the absence of delusion? Which is this kind of arising of clarity, the arising of insight. And finally, to talk a little bit about the possibility of what it means to be free from delusion. So, a delusion is a fixed, false idea that is unshakable despite plenty of evidence to the contrary. And to hang on to our deluded thoughts, it takes a lot of imaginative work to create this alternative world. And we all do it. I remember, as I was thinking about this topic, I was maybe 10 or maybe around 10 years old. I grew up on a farm. We had about 5 acres of lawns. I was just mowing grass all day for the whole summer. I remember I think one of my grandfathers had died. And as I was mowing in the orchard, I went through this thought process of, wow, he's dead. Does everyone die? And I thought, will I die? And then I watched my mind. I remember this distinctly, my mind saying, like, I'll figure some way to get out of this. And it was just this conscious compartmentalization of that thought. And as a great yogi once said, the greatest wonder in the world is everyone dies. The second greatest wonder in the world is that no one thinks they will. And when we look at our capacity to compartmentalize reality, and with all the narratives out there in our culture right now, all these different perspectives on reality, it's astounding how many of us are caught in delusion and confusion. And it's equally, if not more astounding at how cynical people can take advantage of that. So when it comes to delusion, we can see it all around us. But the truth is, we're all operating under some lens of perception that may not be totally in alignment with reality. So the question is there anything that you have believed in the past that you no longer believe? If you go through that inventory, it's really quite interesting. I used to believe with all my heart in the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. And when I think about it, I believed in my heart a lot more egregious things than that. And it opens up a really interesting question. Just to take a deep breath on this one. What are you believing now with all your heart that you may not believe in the future? What thoughts, what beliefs are you assuming are rock solid that may not be? So as we turn our attention to kind of explore delusion and confusion, there are certain qualities of mind that reflect this. One of them is just basic dullness. When you're sleepy, when you're feeling dull, you're not going to see clearly. When you are bewildered, when you have these misperceptions about life, essentially, it's a misconstrued sense of what's real. And as the saying goes, if you argue with reality, you're going to lose every single time. So there's the delusion that comes from dullness and bewilderment and overwhelm. Then there's what we could call forgetful delusion. This is when you say, I can't believe I just ate that whole pizza. There's the automatic pilot spacing out delusion. If you've ever driven your car for a long period of time and then realized you can't remember any of the details, you were just going into automatic pilot. And there's some great synonyms. If you've ever experienced an illusionist, a magician, if you've ever misconstrued what someone actually said, if you've ever been deceived, if you've ever been lost in a fantasy, if you've ever had a hallucination, these are all the flavors of delusion that are divorced from reality. And then, of course, there's a spectrum of delusion, which runs from basic confusion to what we might call psychosis. The feeling that someone is out to get you, the persecutory delusions. It's the paranoia. When you're experiencing extreme delusions, there can be a sense that people are contacting you through nonverbal cues. Someone contacted me through the radio. Delusions of grandiosity. An inflated sense of power or knowledge or special identity. Delusions of feeling controlled by some outside influence. Or religious delusions, using religious symbols to interpret internal turmoil. As Robina Cortin said, we are all mentally ill. We are all delusional. We are all junkies. It's just a matter of degree. That's so powerful. We are all mentally ill. We are all delusional. We are all junkies. It's just a matter of degree. And so this mind is a story generating machine and a prediction machine. And just like in a dream, you take random images and you try to turn them into a narrative. If you've ever had one of those dreams where you're on a train and then a friend from kindergarten joins you and suddenly you're in a balloon and then your dog that died 20 years ago is walking next to you, it's that state. My mother, toward the end of her life, sort of shifted into sort of full-blown delusion. And when she would speak with utter certainty. It was very much like narrating a dreamscape. Just random data points that her mind was trying to put together into an attempt to keep her narrative going, to make sense of it. It was a really challenging experience for me. Do I try to correct her? Do I try to just reinforce where she is? And I opted simply to mirror back to her what she said to me, hoping that might offer her some comfort or maybe even get a little bit of a sense of like, wow, that echo of what I said doesn't make sense. She was so far gone, it really didn't matter. And I just hoped that being accompanied was the most important thing that I could offer her. So that's kind of an extreme case, the extreme cases of paranoia and delusion. But to a lesser degree, we're doing exactly the same thing. You are taking information and you're trying to make sense of it. And that information is your conditioning. All the information you've taken in through life, you're perceiving through that lens. And everything you see is through that lens. As the saying goes, when a pickpocket sees a saint, all he sees are the pockets. That's kind of the bad news. You are run by your conditioning. The good news is that we can begin to shift our relationship to how we perceive by paying attention. I was on a meditation retreat in Colorado, and I was intensely involved in some story where I was feeling indignant and wronged. A side note, it's really important to note that as I look back on that memory, I cannot for the life of me remember the details. I'm just wondering if you've ever noticed this in meditation. You're meditating, you get wrapped up so tight in some internal drama. And then after the meditation, you can't remember anything of what that was. But I remember in this experience of my meditation, I was feeling deeply wronged by something. And there was anger, and there was guilt, there was confusion, there was some shame. And this thought sort of popped into my head. There is something seriously wrong with me. I've had that thought before. But something, maybe it was just in that moment of retreat, being a little bit more aware, something in my mind went, really? Do you really believe that something's wrong with you? And so I stayed with that. I didn't have anything better to do. I was just sitting there meditating, and I just sat with that thought that there's something wrong with me. And I very kind of spontaneously just thought, well, who am I if that's not true? And I had a really interesting experience. First, I had a kind of a deep somatic sense of that belief. When there's something wrong with me, tight, small, contracted. But who am I if that's not true? A sense of expansion and a sense of ease. I was once doing some inquiry work with someone who was really struggling in his life. He was a really successful guy, really, really successful guy. He grew up in a very competitive family, competing against his siblings. His parents were really driving him all the time. They were pretty harsh, always pushing. And he had such a sense of dissatisfaction in his life. And as we explored that feeling of dissatisfaction, as we moved from kind of the story into like that inner experience, I asked him, is there some core operative belief? And it took some time, but where he got to was, I will never be good enough to deserve praise. He didn't say, I'll never be good enough to deserve love. It was just, I'll never be good enough to deserve praise. So we investigated that, and partially how we investigated that was kind of through the work of Byron Katie, if you're not familiar with that, but also with more of a somatic sense. Because again, your issues are in your tissues. So I invited him to reflect that belief when he thinks that thought. And in Byron Katie's work, first, when you have that belief, you ask, is it true? And you're looking for just a crack in the wall. Maybe 99.9% of the time it feels true, but maybe it's not ultimately true. Then you explore, what's it like when you believe that? And where I like to go is, what's that like inside when you believe that? How does your nervous system hold that thought? And so he went deep into that feeling of just feeling small and frustrated and just crushed inside. When that operative thought, I'll never be good enough to deserve praise, a sense of despair and anger and depression, when we had really deep sense of the somatic roots of that thought, of that perception, I then brought out the samurai sword question, and I asked him, so who are you without that thought? I'm not making this up. He literally fell out of his chair. And then we really focused on stabilizing the possibility of who he is without that thought. That lens of perception had created such a diluted sense of reality. And it cracked. It's not to say it didn't reform, but it never reforms the same way. So it's an interesting thing, and you might just take a moment. And doing this inquiry takes some time because you really want to shift down to like the core operative belief. But quite often it comes down to, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, there's something wrong with me. You just might take a moment. We'll do it just like a little Zen pop quiz. And you can do this with your eyes closed, or just take a moment and just kind of sense. Let's just go with the thought of, I'm not good enough. When you think that thought, and we're going to assume it's not true 100%, but when you think that thought, I'm not good enough, what's that like inside for you? When you take the elevator down from your mind, down into your body, how does that thought, I'm not good enough, live on the inside? Can you locate that? Is there a sense of how long this thought and this felt sense inside has been there? How long has that been inside, operative? Is there a sense of what it's like to view the world through that lens of not being good enough? In regard to this thought, I'm not good enough, you might explore the following question, paying attention as best you can to the felt sense. Who are you without that thought? that might be just a glimpse of cracking that hardened lens of perception. And while it's not true all the time, there are times when you may believe you are not good enough, and that belief lives on the inside. Taking the time to recognize it, to see it, to make room for it, to have tea with it, to investigate it, to ask if it's really true, may open up some new possibilities. We hang on to our delusions, and because we are wired for survival, not for happiness. And our thoughts, our beliefs protect us. They keep us from feeling safe. It takes incredible courage to investigate and challenge these operative beliefs. So knowing that delusion, confusion, and ignorance tend to kind of run the day, how do you overcome them? So here are a couple strategies. The first, practicing mindfulness. Non-judging awareness is a powerful way of beginning to recognize how your operating system takes over. Cultivating concentration and steadiness with all the fluctuations of the mind, all the reactivity of the mind. When you can develop sense steadiness and concentration, that will be incredibly supportive for you to keep your keel in the water when you are reacting to all the various rogue waves of reality. Another strategy, question your perceptions. Is it true? There are many strategies for exploring perceptions. The work of Byron Katie is a very kind of powerful, convenient way to do it. When you can identify these core beliefs, to really turn toward them and investigate them. Is that true? Who am I without that? Seeking guidance can be very, very helpful. One of the most challenging things we have in our culture right now is the feeling of isolation, the feeling of loneliness. And there's an interesting thing I ran across a couple of years ago of how being lonely leads to delusion. That when you are alone and you don't have a check on your thoughts, and those thoughts just keep cycling through and cycling through, there's no echo to your thoughts. So naturally you start to believe all of your thoughts. Some of them may be really helpful and powerful, some may be confused and deluded, but when you are around others, and you might share something that's a little bit diluted, and someone can say, really? You really believe that? That reality check you have through communication, through community, really, really helpful. Sometimes we go into periods of deflation where we feel incredibly deflated. Sometimes we go into times of inflation where we feel inflated, we feel that the sense of grandiosity. Connection is a way of getting a reality check. Having guidance with a teacher or guide or mentor or therapist. Incredibly helpful for sorting through what's true and what's not true. You may find real help in studying the teachings. Just any of the core perennial teachings as a way of using them as a reality check. And finally, it's very helpful to reflect on impermanence. Just to reflect on how everything changes, including our beliefs. So these are some of the strategies. Meditation itself, cultivating mindfulness. When you feel really thrown about by the world, cultivating concentration and steadiness. Questioning your perceptions. Seeking community, seeking guidance, seeking relationship. Studying the classic teachings, reflecting on impermanence. Some of the classic strategies. Our thoughts and our beliefs help us feel safe. They help us survive. And there's an interesting line that says that we spend most of our energy, suppressing bliss. It's a really interesting concept. A lot of our beliefs serve to keep us grounded. But there's a really interesting thing. If you are exploring the teachings of liberation, if you will, the analogy is if you take a bunch of fruit flies and you have them in a jar and just have them in there for a day with the lid on. And if you take the lid off after one day, the fruit flies will be flying around, but they'll stay in the jar. They don't go beyond where the limitation was. And this is really fascinating, I find, because we spend most of our life in self-preservation, trying to keep it together, just trying to keep it together. And when we really pay attention, if we really start to turn our attention toward what is real, what do I know to be true, things start to really open up. And sometimes that can be incredibly destabilizing, because that tightly bound sense of self that has been our strategy for survival, you start to deconstruct that. And there can be shifts that are exhilarating and expansive, and there can be shifts that are incredibly destabilizing and a little scary. When I deconstruct some old belief, I often find myself, for example, going back to like there's something wrong with me. And I go, is that true? Do I know that to be true? Who am I without that thought? Like, what if that's not true? What if there's nothing wrong with me? That shift is an expansive sense. And if I really try to hang out there, and I think that's the key, is to hang out there with that shift. Who am I without that thought? It gives us these glimpses into a sense of spaciousness, into a sense of freedom. So an inquiry for you, if you like. If you would bring into mind a moment when you were really happy, a moment when you were filled with gratitude, a moment of intimacy, a magic moment in your life. Just take a few moments and just sense if you can recall a moment where you were happy, touched by gratitude, a magic moment. What did that feel like inside? And now the question here is, in that moment, what is not present? And chances are, you were not wanting the moment to be any different than how it was. There is no judging or comparing of yourself in that moment. And there was no particular confusion. The moment was simply, in its own sense, of flow. And so, to broaden this question, just to see where this question takes you right now. Right now, who are you in the absence of confusion? You might deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. These states of awakening are oftentimes described by what they are not. The absence of desire, the absence of aversion, and the absence of confusion. Our magic moments in life are oftentimes described as moments of profound flow. The moment is simply is. It's simply happening by itself, and we're utterly absorbed into this kind of unfolding moment. Those are kind of exquisite moments, and it's helpful to think that enlightenment or awakening is sort of the absence of these qualities. At the same time, we're living in relationship with reality. So a good friend passed on to me a YouTube video, and I believe it was called Relax, Nothing is Going to Work Out. Relax, nothing is going to work out. It's about Stoicism and basically saying, well, what is the nature of reality? And the nature of reality is you will get bad news in this life. The message that says, call me as soon as possible. The doctor is calling and he wants to talk to you. I'm afraid I have bad news, etc., etc. Stoicism is quite fascinating as a philosophy. It's so akin to Buddhism because it's a reality-based philosophy. So Epictetus wrote this: the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control and which have to do with the choices I actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to uncontrollable externals, but to within myself, to the choices that are my own. So part of our relationship to reality is to discern clearly what you have control over and what you do not have control over. When I was sitting with my mother at the end of her life, when she was utterly, deeply deluded, it was scary because it was completely beyond my control. And I didn't know how to be with her. Lots of struggle. Like, how do I be a good son right now? And I was also had a lot of aversion toward what she was saying and what she was coming up with. And then a phrase came into mind, and that is the practice of wholehearted, enthusiastic cooperation with reality. I'm so grateful for that phrase. It just popped in. Wholehearted, enthusiastic cooperation with reality. And suddenly, I was able to lean in. I was able to get curious about my mother's experience. What was happening in her brain? What was going on with her physiologically? What did she need? What were her unmet needs? The fear kind of dropped away. It was such a profound experience for me to move from utter fear and confusion and pushing away and self-preservation and just general weirdness to wholehearted, enthusiastic cooperation with reality. And through her passing, it allowed me to kind of lean in and be really present. And I found with the passing of my father a couple years later, it's sort of the same thing. Like, okay, this is reality. Can I actually cooperate with it? And the question becomes, what would life be like if we didn't fight reality? What would life be like if we actually cooperated with reality? My guru back in my ashram days was a very charismatic dude. He said this one line, and people were drawn from around the world to be with him. And he was a flawed being, but I learned so much. I'm so grateful for his presence in my life. He said one line in particular that clicked it for me. He said, "People are attracted to me not because of what I know, but how comfortable I am with what I don't know." And I instantly thought, I am so taking that up. How comfortable can I be with what I don't know? And I think this becomes an integral part of working with delusion, this poison of the mind, as is referred to sometimes as confusion and delusion. What do we know to be true, and how rigorous can I be in actually investigating whether it's true or not? So the big three characteristics of reality through this lens of Buddhist psychology is first anicca, impermanence. That anything that is born out of causes and conditions is subject to change. That's your body, that's your mind, your beliefs, everything that's has arisen out of causes and conditions is going to change. The second is dukkha, and that is anything you try to hold on to, it ultimately will be dissatisfying and unsteady because it's all changing. If you focus on anything that changes and try to hang on to it, you're going to experience some stress and some suffering and some dissatisfaction. The third is anatta, and this is speaking to the nature of the self. That while you are this conditioned self because you were born out of causes and conditions, you are subject to change. But at the same time, there is a quality of self, if you will, that is beyond conditioning. So here are these three characteristics of reality, and it's one thing to take them on at face value. Okay, I'm just going to believe that impermanence, suffering, and self are there. Take that at face value, and that's what I believe. That's one level, but a more mature is to really dive in. Is it true? Is it true that everything is subject to change? Is it true that what you believe, you may not believe tomorrow? That this body you're living in may not be here tomorrow? That everyone you love and adore and everything you cherish may not be here tomorrow? Is it really true that anything you fixate on is going to lead to some form of dissatisfaction? Is it true that there is this quality of self that is beyond change? Some quality of reality? If we really know this to be true, how does that transform our lives? So, one of the great realizations that I have almost every time I go on a meditation retreat, and I have it's the same one, is like, I don't have to believe every thought. Not every thought is significant. When we step back even more and we really ask ourselves, okay, so is what I'm believing true? Is what I am holding on to really that significant? It opens up new possibilities. When we become more self-aware, when we begin to recognize all the causes and conditions that shape our experience, there's some really interesting gifts that come out of mindfulness. I remember having this insight maybe 30 years ago that, when I haven't slept well, I spiral down into reactivity and negativity. So when I haven't slept well, I'm just not going to feed my emotional reactivity. It's such a profound shift. It's the gift of awareness. The gift of awareness is all about this waking up out of our delusions, waking up out of believing things are true when they're not true. So let's close with a short meditation, if you will. I'd like to read a short little piece from Lama Yeshe. Why do you feel elated when you are praised and dejected when you're criticized? It's because you don't accept the way things truly are. You're controlled by your hallucinating mind, which is totally divorced from reality. Your up and down emotions are like clouds in the sky. Beyond them, the real basic human nature is clear and pure. Over the next 3 breaths, how much more can you soften and relax and let go? Can you take a moment to honor and thank this body, which does its best to serve your mind and your sense of purpose? Can you honor your mind as this computer to help you find your way? Can you sense this quality of the witness? Your capacity to observe without judging. And can you imagine all the ups and downs of your life like clouds in the sky, and beyond them, the real basic human nature that is clear and pure? Who are you right now in the absence of desire? Who are you right now in the absence of comparison or judgment, ill will? Who are you right now without the filters of the perception of comparing, judging, wanting, the story of what you think life should be? In this remaining minute or so, you might reflect on your practice, your yearning to be more awake and more alive. And taking a moment to wish yourself well. May your path be opening with greater ease. May clarity and wisdom and the awakened heart open with grace. And may all beings benefit from the fruit of your awakening. When you're ready, you can open your eyes if they're not already. Thank you so much for your time and attention. This is great stuff, at least to me. I hope it is to you. So many blessings.